Hey there, Aaron here with Sandvig Law Life and Legacy Planning. I want to talk to you about my most recent blog article, which talks about the 3 people that every entrepreneur needs on their team. First one we're going to start off with might be a little bit of a surprise to you, but it's a bookkeeper. Now, we might think of something that's a little bit more exciting, like a chief technology officer or chief of operations or something like that, but the reality is we all need a bookkeeper. Even if it's ourselves, we need to sometimes don the bookkeeper hat, although I recommend outsourcing it as soon as you can. What does a bookkeeper do though? Okay, the most obvious thing is they're going to reconcile transactions, meaning I've got a bunch of transactions on a credit card or a debit card from my bank, and then I've got receipts from all these different things that I spent money on, making sure that those things line up. One of the things that you can do here is identify if money's getting spent in places that you don't think it should be getting spent. This has happened to me. So I've got a past business where I owned a home service repair business. It was drywall repair. And I had advertising spending that was kind of out of control. I didn't realize that I was spending that much because I had put that off on somebody else. And I wasn't paying attention to what they were doing. And so I'd find out that they were spending 100 or 200% more than I thought. Now, if I had had a bookkeeper, which I didn't at this time, if I'd had a bookkeeper say, hey, your advertising spend is pretty high this month, what's going on? I would have been able to identify this earlier on. So a bookkeeper is going to help you keep accountability of your expenses. Like I said, they also reconcile. Just make sure that things line up. And they can help you make sure that bills get paid on time. I'd love to say I've never paid a bill late, but the reality is if you're a business owner, you've probably done it once or twice, more for some business owners, but either because you don't have enough money in the bank account because you weren't paying attention, or because you're just not tracking when stuff needs to get paid, a bookkeeper is going to take responsibility for that stuff so you don't have to send a check with a little note saying, hey, sorry about this, right? They can take that off your plate. Well, all that does is really just keeps the lights on, right? It makes sure that money is where it's supposed to be when it's supposed to be there. Okay, that's fine. But a bookkeeper can do a whole lot more for you. They can actually categorize expenses, and they're probably going to do this automatically, whether you realize it or not. And they're going to tell you, your marketing expense is this, your materials expense is this, your payroll expense is this, your other general operating expenses like insurance or whatever it might be, like every month, are this. If you work with a good bookkeeper and you can identify things for them you want them to track, they can start breaking this stuff down for you and you can work through it so you can start understanding, hey, I'm spending 15% on marketing, and based on what I've heard from somebody else, it should be 5 or 10%. Or hey, we're trying to grow rapidly and so we're going to spend 25% on marketing, right? You need a bookkeeper to help you identify where you're spending your money, though, in order to start making decisions like that. A bookkeeper can also help you project cash flow. So I actually did this with somebody who's not my bookkeeper, but a business coach, and we sat down and did a cash flow projection for 2024 recently. And that was really helpful because I had concerns about some of my expense profile. And they're like, your expense profile is actually pretty good, but where you're weak is over here. So with the breakdown in expense categories, and then line by line, this expense costs this, this expense costs this, we were able to tweak stuff and find areas where I could trim expenses a little bit, but I had a lot of room to increase other categories of expenses, which comes in especially important if you're trying to grow, because there are certain things that you are going to spend money on if you're trying to grow. So a bookkeeper can help you project out your cash flow needs and where the money's coming in for, let's say, the rest of the year. Okay, so the second person, and cash flow projections kind of leads into this, is a tax advisor. Now you might be thinking, well, tax advisors don't do cash flow projections, they just look backward, right? You're thinking of a tax preparer. A tax preparer is always looking backward, right? Because they're looking at last year's expenses and income to figure out what you have to pay in taxes right now, okay? We're on the front end of tax season right now in January of 2024. Taxes are going to be due, in a few months, and your tax preparer is looking at 2023. But I'm talking about a tax advisor. A tax advisor is going to help you figure out where to spend your money, or excuse me, I should say when to spend your money this coming year and years beyond. I want to make a cautionary point. Don't ever let the tax advisor tell you spend money or don't spend money, because if your business needs to spend money on marketing or capital expenses like vehicles or equipment, spend the money. but work with your tax advisor to make smart decisions about when and how to spend that money. The tax advisor is going to be able to, let's say you've got $50,000 worth of expenses, they're going to be able to help you do it in a way where either because you do it in one year versus another, or because you do it in one category versus another, they're going to help you save on taxes for those necessary expenses. Okay? So then the third person is what I call a lifted advisor. LIFT is an acronym. It's legal, insurance, financial, and tax. Well, maybe you know this about me, but that's what I do. LIFT advising is kind of an umbrella term or concept that covers those four categories. Again, legal, insurance, financial, and tax. Well, we talked about financial with the bookkeeper, and we talked about tax with the tax advisor, right? There are other professionals that can work in these two categories. If you've got a financial planner, for any brokerage accounts or retirement accounts you've got invested, as well as insurance. Insurance is pretty expansive. There's a lot of stuff that falls under that. And of course, legal. Everybody assumes that I'm a lawyer, so I do legal work, right? Legal documents are just one thing that I do. What I try and do is provide advice that covers all these four areas, because the reality is you as a business owner have legal issues, you have insurance issues, you have financial issues, and you have tax issues. And if you've got people for each of these categories on your team, you know how big of a hassle it can be to try and line up meetings either at the beginning of the year or the end of the year with your lawyer, with your insurance agent, with your financial planner or bookkeeper, with your tax person, right? The reality is we need to bring these things under one umbrella, okay? So lifted advising is exactly that. It's trying to capture all of these things. I'm not going to do your tax preparation, but I am going to work with you to identify areas where a tax preparer or a tax advisor is going to be beneficial for you. So maybe I'll do a video sometime in the future on lifted advising more extensively than what it is, but if any of this interests you, by all means, reach out. We can have a conversation. I might put you through a LIFT assessment, which is a tool that gives you the opportunity to rank where you're at on each of these four categories so that we can start figuring out where you're strong, where you're weak, and where we can do work to strengthen you going forward. So I hope that this helps you think through some things. Reach out with questions. In the meantime, take care. Bye.